Second time's the charm. Hi all. First recording failed because I didn't realize spacebar stopped the recording on OBS. It's always a fun time. Me back again. This will probably release before my rework video because it turns out that there's a lot of operators in Siege and the video surpassed half an hour, so that's going to take a while to edit. So in the meantime, I have another video planned. So we we're all Siege players here, right? You're probably not. You're probably someone who has no clue how Siege works. Maybe you are. Doesn't really matter. In this case, doesn't matter, right? Gregor is a Siege YouTuber who specializes in breaking down how an operator works, how their gadget and guns work in combination with their gadget, so on and so forth. Typical sort of breakdown new update YouTuber. Most games have one of these, usually only one or two per game. Gregor is our guy. Usually I like his takes. Usually he's pretty based and has pretty good takes. But this take in particular is not great. This is referring to his the most annoying thing about Frost's rework video. I have my own opinions on the Frost rework. I think it's completely unnecessary and doesn't do anything to help Frost at all. In fact, no matter which way you slice it, is always a net nerf. It's not a rework. There is no instance that Frost gets a buff, as opposed to before. And there are situations where Frost mats are just going to become a lot less useful. So I'm gonna watch this video, and pause it and react to certain pieces of it and give my own opinions. And I'm gonna also intersperse another recording we did a while ago with four of my friends who I will also maybe credit, depending on whether or not I feel like it. And they too have opinions, and my opinions back then as well, that we'll also comment on. So let's do this.
So, dudes, do you guys want some Rainbow Six Siege news? No? You don't care? You don't have a unhealthy parasocial relationship with a video game that's meant to be for fun?
Okay. Right off the bat, mentioning parasocial. This will be mentioned later on by Sam, but parasocial means that one person does all the emotional work and all the work in a relationship, and one person just essentially acts like a parasite. For games, this would not be the correct terminology because games are a two-way relationship. There is no one-wayness to a game. It is always two-way, and that is the same with every piece of entertainment media. Also pointing out fun and Siege, that doesn't happen. Gregor, you've played Siege for how long now? What, 8 years? There's no fun in this game.
You don't? What? Nah. You're mad about the Frost rework. You're gonna get really upset on all social media platforms and then try to victimize yourself and claim that you are a banner holder for a movement against an evil corporate entity because you don't have anything else going on in your life, right? Right. That's what we're gonna do, guys.
Except I do have other things that I could be doing, but I'm bored. I have other things that I could be doing, and along the same vein, I also do have a job. I also do go to uni. I'm doing this because I have spare time and I am bored, and I needed to answer this because there is a level of incorrectness here. Also, I'm not mad. I don't play Frost that much, but we'll get there.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Twitter. I'm going to go to mute and block. I'm going to go.
This is really random. What? I chose speed. Andrew Tate, sure, okay. Dave Chappelle, Elon Musk. The Waffle House has... Isn't that a meme? iDubbbz, Grey Jedi. I can maybe see why someone would want to mute woke and wokeism, because that could become annoying. But Grey Jedi? What, are you a light and dark side exclusivist? Do you not believe that Grey Jedi could exist, Gregor? Not in my Star Wars.
Go to muted words, and I'm gonna type Frost rework forever. Let's see what else I have. Frost. There we.
This is an interesting way to do it. I would say this is probably the most base thing he has in this video. If you don't want to hear something on Twitter, mute the word.
We go. I just saved you about 10 IQ points just now. Go ahead and do it. It's easy to do. What else can we talk about? Let's go to Reddit. Let's go to Reddit, my favorite website. No. What? That's a joke, right? He's joking. Is he joking?
The irony, of course, being that Warden is now picked and banned more. He's picked more than Capcan. I don't know if he's banned more, but I think he has banned a decent amount. And yes, Warden remains to be useless in terms of gadgets, not because his gadget itself is useless. It is very useful. It's just no one turns it on when they take a gunfight. Please, if you're playing Warden, all it takes is to press middle mouse button and it's on.
Joking? He's joking. That's a joke. It's not. Thank you. Thank you. What? Sorry, but drip. This is the correct response. Frost doesn't need a rework. I say that leave Frost alone.
This is correct. You are now no longer punished for getting caught in a frost map. If you die to it either way, oh no, boo-hoo. You died to it either way. But now, if you do get stuck in a frost map and the defenders and your team can't put any resources to get you out, it's like, oh no, no. Anyway, if you keep harsh debuffs that remain indefinitely, enemies still have to respect frost and will still have to clear out a utility. Which, yes, this is correct. The debuff should be permanent. Also, why is it that you don't get the debuff when you leave the frost map with a teammate? This is one of my main issues from it, is that it can't be classified as a rework because you only get that effect in situations that wouldn't occur. You don't have that issue if someone gets you out, so those same situations would still be the exact same. Why are the devs spending months reworking an operator that benefited the game the way it was originally designed, and an operator nobody had an issue with? Everyone knew the welcome mat's flaws and benefits, and this made it consistent and reliable. This is another thing. Waste of developer resources. They are burning developer resources on a rework that no one asked for. People asked for it to chunk a rework. People have not been asking for a Frost rework. Rework operators that people see as problematic, not the operators that people see as perfectly fine. Such things, along the same vein, are removing Sledge as SMG-11. He did not need it removed. No one was complaining about Sledge, and yet they removed it. You need to have some community input in your balance.
Leave Frost as... Okay. Removing any unique...
He cuts this off here, but I'm going to continue reading it. So we're now removing any uniqueness from gadgets, instead making them all essentially do the same thing with a slight twist. Great. Ask yourself this, will this change actually benefit Frost at all? No. Will she see more play at the higher levels? No. Will she be played more at a pro level? Will she actually benefit the person playing her? The answer is no to all of these points. Correct. Her pick rate and ban rate are not that high. Alright, here we go. Patch notes for... This is technically Season 1.2, but close enough, right? Let's go down to defense. By the way, I hate this GIF system, right? It's like some... I want to say some, like, new designer came in and is like, oh, we have this genius idea. We can compress the images down into a single video. That way, it takes up less space. But it's like, you have to pause this. It's nicer to just look at images. You could put a button to say switch to console. You don't have to make them a GIF. It's silly. This. Ranked PC, Emerald and above, defenders. This. This does not need a rework. This is fine. This needs a rework. And I'm not necessarily saying rework to Chunker again, but like something, right? This needs to be brought down a bit. I'm not saying directly nerf him. Please do not directly nerf him. He just needs to have a reduced reliance. This is fine. There are operators that are worse than him. Sorry, I'm so dumb. There are operators like Capcan which are worse than Frost. Frost did not need to be touched. Let's go to console. If it will... Oh, look. Oh, look. It's even worse. Let's go to the ban rates, shall we? She's not there. She's not on the bans. Like, not on the ban charts.
This is a new chapter of my channel. This is a new chapter of my life. I am not investing energy in trying to debate bro balance changes for a video game, especially balance changes for a video game that I know are not that big of a deal. This change with Vigil is not very good. And my argument for it not being very good is an argument that Ubisoft is making, because based off of their own data that they show us to contextualize these changes, Vigil is an undertuned character. Now,
okay, cool. The Vigil change maybe isn't that much of a deal either, because you can avoid the scans by keeping the scan on, your ERC on properly. So along the same vein, it's not that big of a deal, right? That's the thing with all Siege balance changes. On the surface, they're quite minor. It's the more niche situations where a gadget's balancing becomes an issue. Right? According to you, it is not that major of a balance change. I would like to interject and say that's not entirely the case, because it does hurt Frost a lot more than it helps her. In fact, it doesn't help her at all.
it's not. Okay? You can't put the Frost mat in the Pacific Ocean and then maybe get a free pick now. Now you have to follow up on the Frost mat. Guess what? Most Frost players followed up on the Frost mat.
Okay, so this is his justification as to why the change is alright or doesn't change anything about Frost. Except for the fact that he's, again, looking surface level. If you assume that the Frost mat, it just goes off and then you immediately swing it, okay, sure, in that situation nothing changes, but what about the situations where that does change things? Yes, a Frost mat in Narnia catching someone is a bit of a pain, but on the off chance that the attackers are being that tunnel visioned, that far away from sight, they walk into it, they are actively punished for that. Another point, that it also means that attackers can much more effectively get out of a Frost mat or get their teammates out of that Frost mat. It now takes a single person to cover the res, whilst previously it took one person to cover and another person to res. Now, you put two people's lives at risk. If you don't have anyone else to divert to get the res, you put one player's life at risk who was already going to die anyway. On live, you had to put 3 players' lives at risk in order to secure a res. The person who's in the Frost mat, the person resing on the Frost mat, and the person covering them. That's 3 lives at risk, and it's even worse in this situation because in order to make sure that res is not contended, right, on live, you essentially have to have someone covering that res, otherwise you put more players' lives at risk. So in order to prevent more lives being at risk, you have to put another person at risk. On live, Frost punishes attackers more effectively. According to the new changes, if an attacker gets stuck in the Frost mat and they don't have a team to get the res, they either get out or they don't. If they do, we still have a player alive. If they don't, well, that's fine. We can still win the round without them. The cost is no longer there. There is another thing. If it's a 2v1 and you're the Frost and if it's a 1v2, you're the Frost on defense and there's 2 attackers. You hear a Frost mat go off and you know where the other one is. You don't need to go confirm the kill on live. You can go and chase the player that you know where they are and don't need to worry about that back angle because you know they've been stuck in a Frost mat. You don't need to confirm the kill in that situation, because you know that player has neglected to be aware of their surroundings and has been punished for it. That's not going to happen anymore. You now have to move, confirm that down. Also, it significantly removes Frost's character. It's a silly argument, sure, but like, character is important in a game. Frost is the one-shot character, and now it's like, they're back up again. Also, logically, it doesn't make sense. Why can a character get themselves up from being downed when their femur breaks, but not when they get shot? Not their femur, sorry, their lower leg. Right? Why can you get down out of a down in one situation, but not another?
Because that's how you're supposed to place the frost mat. Those one-off kinds of, put a frost mat in like mudroom way on the other side of the map. You weren't able to capitalize on that anyway because they get picked up.
But it means that attackers have to divert resources to that. I'm not suggesting it's a good strategy, but you're also neglecting the fact that even when you play Frost properly, you still get nerfed. The self-res time is 2.5 seconds. That's not enough time to act on most of the time.
Okay, so this change does not make Frost a bad character. This is not Ubisoft wasting time.
Okay, but they are wasting time. There was no reason to make this Frost change. This Frost change barely affects anyone, and you're kind of contradicting yourself here. If this doesn't affect Frost, and the way you play her, then why is it not a waste of time? In my opinion, it's both. It affects her negatively, and it's a waste of time because no one asked for this change.
Wasting dev resources for months. Their focus is... Stop. You are not a game dev. Stop trying to tell game devs how their day-to-day workflow goes. You don't know what you are talking about.
I would once again like to insert the clip of him talking about the smoke change. According to your statement here, you should not be allowed to comment on balance changes because the devs know what they're doing. The devs, it's their day-to-day workflow. The devs have proven time and time again they are not entirely capable of creating a perfectly balanced game. No devs are. The difference here is that they have proven a lot that they make silly mistakes, and often have to either undo them straight away in the case of the Ying change, or the smoke change, or players are really annoyed and it makes a certain playstyle non-viable, i.e. the Sledge SMG11 change. Just because it's the dev's decision does not mean it's the correct decision. Also, you don't have to be a game dev to understand that something isn't a good idea. Players can still visualize scenarios in their heads, and maybe they are not as good at it as devs, but you don't have to be a dev to know whether or not a balance change is a good idea.
Stop. Why do you have a parasocial relationship with a video game?
One-sided relationships, where one person extends emotional energy, interest, and time in the other party, the persona, and the other party, not in, and the other party is completely unaware of the other's existence. This would mean that game deving and playing is not a parasocial relationship, because both sides support each other. The devs make the game that the players want. The players fund and play that game. It is a two-way relationship. Celebrities, organizations such as sports teams, or television stars. This is more around personalities, which it says here, the persona. A development company that is building something to be watched and then participated back in is not one-sided. Interest and time, yes. The players invest interest and time. The devs invest interest and time. It can't be a parasocial relationship.
Why are you mad about a balance change for a video game and you are not ascertaining whether the change is good or bad? You're just looking at it and then you go, wow, no, no. Stop. That's not a healthy response. That's not an emotionally healthy or mature response. You don't know what you are talking about.
There is an element of hypocrisy here where he accuses other people of having a non-logical emotional outburst. What do you call what just happened? Right? The same thing is happening here, but you are in the right? So you're allowed to do this, okay? It doesn't work. I am maintaining my composure here because even though I don't think the change is a good idea, likelihood I'm not going to be heard and the change doesn't go through. Whatever, I don't play Frost anyway, but when I do, I still want to be able to have fun. But you've just gotten quite annoyed at people for quote-unquote backseat deving. Commenting on a balance change isn't backseat deving. That's a fairly normal thing for most people to do, most gamers to go, oh, I don't know if this change is going to work, or, oh yeah, this change is exactly what this character needed, right? That's a fairly normal thing for someone to do if they're invested in a game and invested in a specific character.
This is Siege. This is talking about Siege in 2023. This is making content for Siege in 2023. This is just like, this is what we do. This is what we do now. Map got reworked. Here's how to do the new map. It's too hard. I don't care.
Okay, yeah, this is another one of his actually good takes. Some players just refuse to learn not good maps, sorry. Some players just refuse to learn new maps. I am one of those players. I refuse to learn Emerald Plains and Nighthaven. Oh no. Yeah. I'll accept responsibility for that. I'll accept responsibility.
Ubisoft hates you. Ubisoft hates you. They don't like you. They think you should play something else, and they balanced it for Pro League. Evil Pro League.
The old Pro League argument he likes to bring up quite a bit. My question is, of course, who does this change actually affect? We came to the conclusion in the video that it doesn't really affect anyone. Casuals is probably the best bet. Ironically, the change is only really targeted towards casuals. But then again, it still technically targets Pro League because it essentially turns anyone who's in a Frost mat into a mini shield operator. If you don't deal with them, then after a certain amount of time, they will become a threat again. Yay. Also, that's right, we're also getting a not so particularly great shield rework because Ubisoft doesn't like random chance of hipfire, so you know what you could do? Not make hipfire random, Ubisoft. That would help. Another unfun change is changing the way shields work, probably again for Pro League, despite the fact that hitting a one-shot headshot with a pistol and a shield is one of the least likely things in the game to happen. They're gonna be like, it happens so much, guys.
Bad change. It's not. It hardly affects your gameplay loop. You were
okay, so why put it in? If it doesn't affect your gameplay loop, why put it in? Like you said, it's not a waste of developer resources, and yet you contradict yourself. If it doesn't affect your gameplay loop, why put it in?
This change is going to roll out, and then people are going to play Frost the exact same way that they were playing her before, and they're going to get 90% of the same impact.
Okay, that's still 10% lost, but I digress. We still have the other issue. It still means that if you can't capitalize it on that quick enough, it's 2.5 seconds, then attackers usually get a massive power advantage now, because the defenders aren't necessarily expecting them to be out of that mat.
There's going to be those 10% of instances where the rework does something different, And that's, you know what? That's good enough. That modifies the gameplay loop in a way that's not obstructive.
Okay, so again, you hang on. You just said modifying the gameplay loop in a way that's not obstructive. You're obstructing the gameplay loop. That's in order to modify the gameplay loop, you have to obstruct the gameplay loop. 10% is still significant. Most balance changes in Siege are small percentage jumps. This is larger than most percentage jumps. 10%. Right? Most changes are small percentage changes to speed, armor, damage, scopes even, right? They're not massive changes. 10% is larger than most changes are. I know we're kind of arguing a number that no one actually knows here, but in saying 10%, that's still significant.
That's okay. But I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Well, there's arguments for this, arguments for that. No. The change is fine. It's fine.
Okay. I know this is a bit of a silly argument on my part, but he goes on for what I believe is the rest of the video and says the change is fine. And the way he says that, listen to that again.
For that, no. The change is fine. It's fine.
That it sounds more like he's saying it's just fine, guys. It doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't sound like he actually thinks the change is necessarily a good change. It sounds more like he just thinks it's an okay change. But he's not providing a good reason as to why the change actually is healthier for the game. Better. Right? The only argument I can realistically see for this is for new players who are just joining casual and they go, oh, I just stepped into a frost mat. And then they don't want to play again. Except that's not what happens. That's never what happens. When they vault over a window or shield and get stuck in a frost mat, you know what that teaches them? Look down and shoot whenever you enter a window. That teaches them to do that. And now enemies, traps, anything hiding at the bottom of a window, they now know to check for. Frost mats teach players that, and now that's gone.
We're in the business of giving people siege information, and then if the siege information is too complicated for a complicated game, we don't make any money because people don't want to sit down and just pay attention to something for a minute. And they're like, this is too hard, I don't want to play.
This is, again, another situation where he's correct. Players have gotten a shorter attention span. You can see this in your own ranked games where the defense decides, it's a 5v1, we're gonna push him outside. It's like, yeah, that's just what happens now. Players just have such poor attention spans. They can't be bothered watching something for all of more than 60 seconds. This is an issue more fundamentally with our generation. Again, a correct take on his part. I do agree here. So the issue is more targeting players who are willing to listen and willing to give that and willing to learn new sites and new setups.
You could try to learn and then get to experience that fulfillment, that joy of making an outplay, doing a really interesting setup that has a lot of different moving parts.
Yeah, okay, but you know what's going to make it harder to do an outplay and have an interesting setup? Just allowing the attackers to walk off having their leg broken. Yeah, just... I mean, I'm not saying it's... I'm not saying it's impossible to do a Frost outplay, but one of the main aspects of Frost that makes her a character is the fact that her mats one-shot, but only really if you're not paying attention, right? They made Kapkan's traps do, what, 60 damage? Maybe? I don't remember what the exact number is. I think it's 60. They reduced the damage of Kapkan's traps from one-shots to about half, so that Frost could take that position. Frost's character is the trapper, and trapping is keeping them trapped. You can't really do as many outplays if they can just walk it off, right? In this situation, you'd be better off picking Legion, who has better sound cues. He gets 8 traps. He has a vastly better gun. Um, not being able to sprint if they're far enough away from wherever the doorway to sight or window to sight is, usually it's fine. Not to mention Legion's traps are also invisible. So for the most part, you have to be actively combing through wherever you're walking, and that still makes that difficult. Whereas a Frostmat's kind of obnoxious, especially her elite. Why'd they make her elite's trap more obnoxious?
I want to LARP. I want to LARP being a cop. I want to LARP being a military person. And that's as deep as it goes. That's deep. That's it. That's as deep as it goes for some people. And that's that's great. But the people who are really into that, they go play games that are more suited for that kind of play. Like,
I want to point out, Siege was originally marketed as a more realistic milsim in comparison to other games, right? It had destruction, it had this sort of idea of being a much grittier, realistic milsim. That's what most Rainbow Six games were before this, right? But then you try to argue that this is not what Siege is, when this is what it was originally advertised as. So most people still have that sort of lingering idea of, I just want to play a milsim. And I agree, that's not what it is. But you can't necessarily say, oh, you should just play something else. This is what Siege was, and for the most part still is kind of marketed as. Right? We look at Azami's season, it was all about international politics and the assassination of a major banking leader. I believe he was a banking leader. Right? There's still that aspect of being a milsim and more realistic. So you can't argue that it's just not. It's still being advertised as that.
like Arma, like Squad, like Insurgency. Those are great games for that sort of thing.
Okay, and now you kind of self-contradicted, because those games are probably even more complicated than Siege. These players that want to LARP and play a milsim play Siege because it's kind of got that sweet spot of complication to its mechanics. They're difficult to learn. They're easy to understand, but hard to master. On the other hand, you've got games like Arma, where you need essentially multiple hour-long YouTube videos to start flying a plane. That's gets a bit too far.
We need to go outside. We need to touch grass. We need to touch ass. We need to do anything. We need to do anything at all that makes us not behave this way. It's cringe.
I see his point, because he's like, oh, we need to stop behaving this way. Okay. So you're making a whole video about it. You're making a whole video about a balance change that you have a disagreement with the community with, and you're posting it on YouTube instead of, you know, going and touching grass, as you say. And not to say that I'm any better. I'm not saying that I am better. I am not a I'm not the peak of masculinity, right? Far from it. But you can't say, along the same vein, that we specifically, he's speaking in a group here, right? He's saying us in total, but he's more implying it to his audience, which, funnily enough, probably agree with him anyway.
It's not normal. Most people don't leave a comment about a video game balance change and get this upset. It's not a thing.
He's getting upset about people leaving well-worded comments where they do bring up valid points. I don't know what else to say.
I hate Reddit. I hate Reddit so much. I think Reddit represents everything absolutely wrong with the way that things are talked about.
Did he sound like Ben Shapiro? I don't know. Maybe it wasn't Ben Shapiro, but like he sounded like a, I don't know, some conservative commentator. He sounded like maybe there's a mix between Peterson and Carlson. But like, okay, guess what you can do? I will give you your own advice from the start of the video. Get off Reddit then. Turn off the Siege subreddit then. You can do that. And look, that's fine. Let me go back.
But now I'm not 17 anymore. I'm turning 27 this year. I hate Reddit. I hate Reddit so much. I think Reddit represents everything absolutely wrong with the way that things are talked about online. And it's not just...
Yeah, he sounds a little like, I think, Peterson.
It's not exclusive to gaming communities. It happens very often in the entertainment industry. It happens with politics. Reddit it really just represents what is happening to people and the way that they conduct discourse. And it all comes down to...
Keep in mind, he is turning this into a video and is posting this on YouTube, which, you know, has likes and dislikes.
That's it. That's the only thing that matters now. Constructing your opinion. And
I would also point out that he showed people at the start of the video commenting on Reddit, constructing their opinion and giving their reasoning for why they don't like the change. Valid reason.
Argue. And so this is talking about game balancing. This is every freaking gaming community on the planet right now.
So he talked previously about it not being normal to discuss balance changes, and then also says that this is the same thing that every other game community does. So it is normal to discuss balance changes.
Any kind of change that happens, it doesn't matter if it's a good change or a bad change, as long as people are upvoting, that's the correct opinion. That's the take. And so right now the take is Frost rework bad. Do we know why the Frost rework is bad? No, it doesn't matter.
Except for the fact that, again, you put comments at the top of this video about people who did who didn't like the Frost rework and gave well-articulated arguments of reasons why they shouldn't change Frost, and you cut them off and didn't read the actual argument, and now you're complaining that people aren't giving their arguments and they're just stating their opinion. Again, simple reasons.
Please stop getting mad at Varsity Gaming's tweets. If I have to read, it's not the fact that people disagree with Varsity Gaming's tweets. It's how upset, it's how pissed off people get about video game opinions.
Once again, another correct take. People shouldn't get annoyed at video game opinions, but I will once again rebound this at you, who slammed his desk because of someone else's video game opinion. There is some pretty blatant hypocrisy here.
It is exhausting. You don't want to hear your favorite Siege content creator's opinion. You want your favorite Siege content creator to echo the sentiment you already had going in, or you have no opinion and then you want to copy paste their opinion from their brain into your brain.
This is kind of correct and incorrect. You want your favorite content creator to support your opinion, because then you understand that your opinion is not isolated to just you. Let's say, for example, we have average Gregor supporter, right? Who thinks that the Frost rework is a good idea. They feel isolated, and they hear that Gregor also supports the Frost rework. Therefore, they essentially have an authoritative source which they can use to back up their argument. This is how debating works in most situations. You have an authoritative source give you information, and then you use that. Along the second point, people who don't have an opinion. Okay, so someone doesn't have an opinion about the Frost rework and doesn't know what to think about it. And then someone gives them information, and then they use that. Again, that's fairly normal. Let's say, for example, a rework occurred and I wasn't really sure what to think about it. It's a character that I didn't play, and it's a rework that didn't really make much sense to me. I go watch a content creator who does play that character and who that rework would make sense to, and they say yes they do like it, or no, they don't like it. I now have an authoritative source giving me information to draw my own conclusion. Whether or not I support that is my own prerogative. In the case that I do, however, you yell at us and say we can't have our own opinions.
I don't know what it's like to work for Ubisoft, but I imagine, I think a lot of these guys, they probably just don't really tune into the community feedback that much because it doesn't seem like anybody has anything positive to say ever. Even when there's something good. When there's something good that happens, nobody says anything.
This is a bit of a, what's the word? Oh, yes. A false conclusion. Just because people don't say something when a good change happens doesn't mean they don't think the change is good. Negative emotions have a greater effect than positive emotions. We know this. If you think a change is bad, you're going to have a greater response to a bad change than a good change. If Ubisoft makes a good change and they get less or no feedback from it at all, then you know it's a good change. If they get a lot of good feedback from it, then it's a very, very good change. If they make a small change and people have an outcry about it, you know that it's a bad one. There isn't nearly as much commenting on whether or not a change is good. This is just normal. This is just how human brains work, Gregor. This is just how people work.
But when there's a change that could be perceived as bad, it's not. It'll be fine. They'll still talk about it like there's a bill on the House floor that's gonna have sweeping ramifications.
I once again like to point you to the smoke change. If we hadn't had a massive outcry and people saying, no, we don't want this change, and this massive sort of, like you say, people acting like there's a bill on the House floor that needs to be passed, we would currently have a version of the game where Smoke takes damage to his own smoke grenades. Okay? Your point here is moot, because if there is no outcry at all, Ubisoft just gets to make changes that, quite frankly, most people wouldn't enjoy. Community feedback is what makes the balance of a game work.
They'll talk about it like somebody is like passionately discussing like politics or something. They'll get that mad. They'll have the same level of upset as a political commentator on NBC. It's a video game.
I don't want to make an assumption here, but you are making the same sort of aggressive arguments for a lot of what you believe. I don't want to be necessarily necessarily assume things, but you're clearly a Star Wars fan. I would imagine you probably have some strong opinions about Star Wars, and probably along the same vein, you will debate Star Wars. Not necessarily angrily. I imagine most people don't, but you still have strong opinions about things like the Grey Jedi, which I brought up as a joke earlier, but which is probably something that you have thoughts around, right? Just because it's fictional and doesn't exist in real life doesn't mean you can't have an opinion about it. I would do the same thing. I too am a Star Wars nerd. But just because it's fictional doesn't mean you can't have an opinion about it. Just because it's not you who's making it doesn't mean you can't have an opinion about it.
And you're wrong. Not only are you wrong, you're also mad. How can you be mad and wrong at the same time?
Take a look in the mirror. What do you see? Do you see it clearer, or are you deceived?
I've never been wrong or mad about anything, so
he's being ironic here, but it's just funny.
I guess I can't really relate to that.
Yeah, like I said, he's being ironic, but it's kind of funny. That's it. Those are my issues. Don't send hate to Gregor. He has some good takes. I respect a lot of his takes. It's mainly just this one that I don't agree with, right? So, yep, that's it. goodbye for now, I guess. Yeah. Bye.
Only human after all. I'm only human.